All
Yep.
right. Okay, so yep, just have a few quick questions for you regarding the cyanobacteria bloom that we had locally here in Lane County. First of all, can you just tell me what this is? We hear this big scientific term, but what is it really?
Yeah, absolutely. So cyanobacteria are a type of bacteria that are naturally occurring in almost every single ecosystem across the globe. We find them in arid deserts, we find them in Arctic tundras, and unfortunately, we find them in our local waterways. They are a necessary part of the ecosystem and provide a lot of the oxygen evolution globally. Actually, we think up to 20% of oxygen production is actually due to cyanobacteria. And there's a lot of other ecosystem services that they provide, things like the production of nitrogen in the middle of the ocean that supports those food webs. In settings like Fern Ridge Reservoir, especially when we see pronounced heat domes or temperature events like we did towards the start of June, that first week going into the second week of June, due to some of the adaptations that these cyanobacteria have developed over their 3 billion year life history, they're actually the oldest organism we're aware of in the world. They really outcompete everything else. And especially once temperatures in the water get above 19 Celsius, which is right around 66 degrees, the doubling time that we think of, which is a measure of how fast they reproduce, which is very important for community dynamics, especially for aquatic ecosystems, just skyrockets. And so that doubling time is so much faster than all of the other organisms that might be in those bodies of water that these cyanobacteria really start to take over. And that doubling time can get as short as 12 hours. So you can think of that as the size of these cyanobacterial masses, or something that we refer to as a bloom, can double every 12 hours.
Okay, great. Well, not great, but that's an interesting fact, especially, you know, the timing of it. You mentioned the 12-hour timeline. So it forms in those warm environments and those warm temperatures. Is this just like when the temperature spikes? Maybe that's more common for it to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, so once we get those water temperatures above 19 degrees or 19 Celsius, 66 Fahrenheit, they really start outcompeting everything else that's in the water, and we stop seeing balanced growth of various organisms. And with that very short doubling time, they also have some other ecological adaptations that really allow them to thrive. They are opportunistic nutrient sequesterers, which is a fancy way of saying that they're really good at taking up food from the ecosystem. And they also have some specialized carbon capture mechanisms that make them really, really efficient at photosynthesis. They've had a long time to develop some specialized skills that really let them thrive. And so when we see those warm temperature events, coupled with high nutrients to start with in the water column, which is pretty common surrounding our lakes that have urban cores nearby or associated agriculture, those warm temperatures and those high nutrient inputs are the two things that we really think of as driving these large bloom formations.
Okay.
And once they start cooking, they don't really stop until the weather cools off.
Okay, good to know. And what prompts it's discovered, and correct me if I'm wrong, by a test the OHA performed. So what prompts that test? Is it when the weather fluctuates, you guys are more on the radar of testing it, or does it take somebody who thinks they see it and calling you guys to go test it?
Absolutely. There's a few different mechanisms. We do have a public reporting form on our website, which can be found at healthoregon.org/HAB, as in harmful algal bloom. And we encourage members of the public to submit reports. When we do receive those, we always vet them with water body managers or natural resource specialists in the area. We also rely heavily on a partnership with the Department of Environmental Quality for monitoring of these events. They are our preferred sampling partner and the group that conducts all of the laboratory analysis for the presence of toxins. But as these have become more common and awareness surrounding them and risks from the toxins these blooms can produce in some circumstances has become more pronounced. Starting in 2023, the state legislature resourced us at the Health Authority as well as DEQ to really expand the size and scope of our program. So now we have an ambient loop that encompasses 45 of the most recreated lakes across the state that we also are aware of have had a history of blooms. So we receive reports about potential changes in conditions at those sites every few weeks. And so between our own monitoring campaigns, information we receive from partner agencies from a local to federal scale, and reports we receive from the public, there's a number of avenues for us to hear about potentially concerning conditions. And when we do receive those reports, we take them seriously and do some investigation into what things look like on the site. We also have some satellite tools that allow us to look at bloom conditions every 5 days or so across the entirety of the state. And some folks smarter than I have actually developed ways to take that satellite information and extract a signal that's specific to the photopigments of these cyanobacteria. So we can look at a water body and say, you know, there looks like there's a pretty big bloom. This photopigment that's specific to cyanobacteria is present. We've received reports from trusted partner agencies. We at the Health Authority have received photos indicating presence of bloom. Sometimes we receive microscope images that really let us key in on who might be there and whether or not they're a potential toxin producer. We look at historic records from previous samples we've collected at a water body, and we kind of weigh all of these things together when we would determine whether or not we're going to collect a sample for toxin analysis or whether or not we're going to issue an advisory. And dating all the way back to 2011, our protocol is if we're concerned enough about a bloom, it's present, we're receiving complaints about it, and we're able to collect a sample for toxin analysis within 1 business day, we do issue advisories in those instances. It is the case that sometimes those toxin results come back as non-detects with no toxin present. Not every circumstance or every single bloom does produce toxins, but on balance, we still see those advisories that go out before we receive toxin results being the most health protective approach, because in some circumstances they do result in very, very high detections, which we've also seen this season for some of the other advisories that we've put out.
Okay. And so it sounds like, you know, there's a few avenues for the alert. And then that being, you know, somebody actually seeing it, those satellite images, and then your verified partners who can pretty much, if I understand correctly, verify it in person. When they are verifying it in person, in just a kind of simple term, how do they test it? Do they take a sample of the water, or is it just visual?
No, it's visual, but they would also collect a sample of the water that's analyzed for a number of parameters that indicate the presence of a bloom and the toxicity of a bloom. We actually do quantitative toxin analysis, so we're trying to put a number on that toxin concentration, and that's what our program is really based off of, is the presence or absence of those toxins when we are issuing these advisories.
And
if we're unable to,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said if we're unable to collect a toxin sample in a timely fashion, we will issue precautions, but those don't go out with the same degree of urgency. They would be posted to our website for notification, and we do have educational signage that we ask partners and area resource managers to post surrounding the lakes, because that really is the basis of our program. We don't have the authority to shut down these water bodies. We do have the ability to provide folks with information that allows them to keep themselves and their families and their pets safe. And that's what we really try and do as the basis of the program.
Yeah, great, most definitely. And when you decide to lift those advisories, what is the process in that? Do you retest the water? And I'm saying you as in, you know, OHA and partners.
Yeah, the Health Authority.
Is that a retest of the water, or is this a look at those satellite images, or?
It would have, once the advisory goes out, it would have to be based on us having a sample that indicates that toxin is not present or is below what we call a recreational use value, which is the threshold at which we're concerned about ingestion due to recreational routes. And so we think of things like in water recreation, so swimming, high-speed water sports like water skiing, wakeboarding, wake surfing, anything where you could be exposed to that prop wash and ingest or inhale stuff coming up out of the water are really the things we're concerned about. We still encourage folks to go out and visit those waterways, hike, paddle, fish, bird watch, anything that you can think of that wouldn't cause ingestion of the water when these advisories are in place, we would still encourage.
And speaking of fish, if the advisory was in place and someone went fishing, could they eat that fish or no, since the fish is in that water?
This is something we've started to look into. The Healthy Fish Consumption Program also lives within our Healthy Waters unit. And we're starting to investigate whether or not these cyanobacterial toxins appear in that fish tissue. Right now, we don't have any evidence to suggest that, but we do, based on where things tend to accumulate within fish, we think of things like fats and organs. We do advise folks to fillet the fish, discard the entrails and the skin, not eat those portions of the fish, and then to rinse the fillet in clean water prior to consuming it.
Okay, great. And then I had actually coincidentally had another interview at the Fern Ridge Reservoir, separate topic, but there were posted signs when I was there. However, if somebody were to visit and had a question, now does Lane County, for this park specifically, would Lane County park representatives there on site be able to say, yes, it's been lifted, yes, it hasn't? Or do you advise anyone with questions to not ask them, but rather go to your website? Like, where's that verified information instead of, oh, well, I heard, they said it might be lifted type thing,
Right, absolutely. So Oregon is very large. We have 1,400 named lakes, and we can't be everywhere at once. So we really do rely on a robust partner network to get this work accomplished. Anytime there's an advisory, we will have communicated with the local public health authority, any of the natural resource managers associated with the lake. So you can think about things like Forest Service, if they have a park that they manage, Oregon State Parks, if they have parks or campgrounds, county parks, etc. We will have already notified and engaged these partners in every single instance where there's an advisory in place. And so those trusted partners are absolutely folks that people can look to for accurate, up-to-date information. Our website is also a phenomenal resource. So again, healthoregon.org/HAB. There's a lot of tools and educational information on there that can allow folks to familiarize themselves with what these blooms look like, what signs and symptoms of exposure are. Again, those public reporting channels. And then we also have our up-to-date advisory and precaution map on there. So it's always a good one-stop shopping location, but if someone's out of the reservoir and wants to check in briefly, those camp hosts, state park staff, local public health staff should all be able to provide accurate and up-to-date information.
Okay, yeah, and then kind of wrapping up things here, my last question would be, this weekend we're expected to reach temperatures in the 90s again, close to 90s in Eugene after a few days, especially last week, mid 60s raining. Now it's been mid 70s, we're getting that spike. So like you said in the beginning of the interview, does that raise some concern? Should you keep that in mind before you go swimming, or would this happen in a few days after that warm up?
Right now, we're not concerned about the bloom at Fern Ridge. We were able to collect a sample from the lake when it was basically at the peak of the recent bloom density, and there were no toxins present there. So we wouldn't necessarily in the short term be concerned about that changing drastically, and I wouldn't steer people away from recreating at the lake at this time.
Okay, great. And then let's see. Could you, I talked to the Lane County Park Superintendent who kind of reiterated that, yes, well, you should take precaution now because of the advisory then wasn't lifted. He mentioned, you should take precaution anytime you're in the lake, really. You should be a little vigilant. And can you touch on that, what your personal thoughts are?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our favorite catchphrases is "When in doubt, stay out." Like we said, we sample a site at a water body, sometimes two, and we are trying to capture that worst case exposure scenario. So we're looking for things like public swim beaches or docks or areas that are, folks are getting into the water. And within those areas, we're looking for where a bloom might be the densest, but that doesn't mean that we have captured conditions across an entire water body. So we really do encourage folks to look at those educational materials, familiarize themselves with what a bloom looks like. And if the water does look foamy or scummy, has a spilled paint appearance, blue-green scums, pea-shaped globules, all of these things, we would encourage them to avoid those areas of the water. Young children, due to level of activity and their propensity for swallowing water, typically are more impacted, and then dogs as well, especially because they tend to drink water, lick their fur, will lick things off of the shoreline. We also see some more severe effects in those animals. So, yep, absolutely. If you see any of those things that look concerning, when in doubt, stay out. And if you want to get advance notice of what conditions for any particular water body would look like, I would again encourage folks to look at that healthoregon.org/HAB website.
Okay, great. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to mention or add?
Absolutely. So we are participating in a biospecimen pilot with the Center for Disease Control this year. This is allowing us to collect biospecimens in the event that someone or their animals are exposed. So if you do feel like you're suffering symptoms from a harmful algae bloom exposure, contacting the Oregon Poison Center or your local veterinarian is a great option for us to collect some more information to be able to determine, the true risk of recreating within any of these given situations.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's all. Thank you so much. That's all I had.